Hey, what's up, everybody? Chris here, and I'm going to bring you my review of Rebel Moon Part 1, A Child of Fire. And I'm looking at my phone because I had to remember that full title because I just kept calling it Rebel Moon, but I guess this is Part 1 of a longer thing, and that's very clear in the way that it ends. This has been a long gestating project, with Zack Snyder departing the DC Extended Universe, and then sort of moving into the realm of Netflix, and then sort of presumably giving him free reign to make the movie that he wants. He put together here kind of a science fiction fantasy epic, but I would say leaning more into the sci-fi piece of that for sure. But anyway, let me just kind of briefly summarize the plot of this. And really, what it comes down to is you've got a group of sort of rebellious insurgents that really don't start off that way, right? The movie starts where you've got these characters who are living in a village on this planet, which seems relatively peaceful. It's orbiting a gas giant. There are a lot of nice visuals there. But then you got these bad guys showing up, and you get some exposition by way of Anthony Hopkins, I think it is. That's who it sounded like anyway, discussing the assassination of a king and how now there is sort of this dictatorship in place. And so it's kind of the standard good guys versus bad guys kind of stuff. And the way the bad guys look here is very reminiscent of Nazi soldiers, really, just sort of in their garb and their presentation, that kind of stuff. So very clearly kind of playing on that sort of imagery, I think. But the thing that I kept thinking about as I watched this movie, and even my wife, who came into it very late, I was watching it downstairs on our bigger television, and it was about a third of the way through. Maybe there was a quarter of the movie left, something like that. So very much toward the end of it, she sat down and she observed one of the things that I had been thinking about the whole time I was watching, which was this seems like a cobbled together thing borrowing from a lot of different properties and IPs. And so I think what you've got here is part Star Wars, part Dune, part any kind of little guy raising up and rising up to take on the larger big bad sort of situation here. They try to craft a villain that you love to hate, and then you've got sort of the underdog confronting that villain toward the end, but there's a very much sort of a Vader kind of ish situation taking place there. But all of that to say that in the end I found this really completely disappointing. I think the biggest problem here, among other things, goes back to what I was just alluding to, which is that it feels like it's sort of a Frankenstein together work of art in a sense. But I think Zack Snyder kind of gives in to some of his worst tendencies, in my opinion. And that's not to say that I don't think he has some good films under his belt. Man of Steel is one of my favorite comic book movies of all time. I think it's an amazing movie, 300. He's directed some really cool stuff. Even his version of Justice League, I was very much on board with. I really enjoyed that. But this just feels kind of like a dour, dull, bland, not at all memorable effort. And it was kind of surprising to me. I mean, you really would have thought that he would have swung for the fences. Now, I guess the question then would be, did Netflix hold any of this back, right? Or was there sort of a better version of this movie out there somewhere, but they culled it back for any reason, which I can't imagine why they would do that. But anyway, it just feels like really something completely forgettable in the end. And it feels really corny, right? I mean, there's a lot of cheese to it. And honestly, it's like every other, no, this is a little bit of an exaggeration, but it feels like every other scene is a slow motion shot, which that's one of Zack Snyder's things. He loves doing that. But here, he really leans heavily into that. And it just gets a little bit old and tedious. Like there are moments that are in slow motion that don't really need to be in slow motion. It felt like to me. I mean, if you were to cut out all the slow motion stuff in this movie, it would probably trim out a solid 6 or 7 minutes off the entire runtime, something like that. But it feels a little too self-important. And I think the thing that kind of surprised me about it too is that it's kind of a bloodless movie for the most part. And it's not that funny, right? I mean, this is sort of a setup that, given its inherent cheesiness a little bit, you would think that the characters could kind of poke fun at one another, could make some wisecracks about the situation, but it takes itself really seriously to the point of just being kind of eye-roll inducing, and because of that, it makes it that much harder to buy into what you're seeing on the screen. So all of that to say, yes, I guess we're getting a part 2. I don't really care, though. Like, I will see it when it comes out because I have a Netflix subscription, but that's the thing with this, right? Like, I'll watch it because it's on Netflix and because I'm paying for Netflix, but if this were in a movie theater and that was the only way I could see it, or I had to rent it to stream it or something like that, like I would not go out of my way to see the second one. It just feels like kind of a dull Star Wars plus Dune ripoff that's just not that good and is just wholly unremarkable when it gets down to it. So anyway, definitely disappointing, but if you've seen Rebel Moon Part 1, let me know what you think about it down in the comments below. And as always, thanks so much for watching.